Hi, I'm Kristen, the author of The Age of the Child.
Hi, I'm Isabel. I'm the founder and firebrand of the Uprising Spark.
Hi, I'm Lenora. I'm the creator of The Bitchy Bookkeeper, and we are the three founding non-mothers of Childfree Girls. In this episode, we are going to be discussing the myth that being child-free is selfish. So I want to start off this conversation with a question to you two. Why is it so hard for people to admit that they do not want to have children?
I would say fear of judgment, mainly. It is so, we've said this several times, it's just so embedded in human beings' DNA that women have to reproduce. It's like a given. And in some cultures, it's stronger than in others. And in my case specifically, I don't care now. I tell everyone I'm child free. I'm like, never having kids. But at the beginning, it was hard because it was like, I don't want to, of course I had, I don't want to be judged. I don't want people to ask me, oh, why? Like, is there something wrong with you? Or like, that's none of your business. It doesn't matter why I made my decision. It's none of anybody's business. It's only mine. And people tend to pry a lot when, talking about things that are really personal. And like I said, they're kind of like a given and they want to really know why it is that you don't want to have children. And I find it really annoying because I'm not the kind of person who can like really just shut somebody down when they start doing that. And I think at the beginning it's hard, not only because of the judgment of, just friends or whatever, but also family. And
Sorry. This is as bad as having a baby.
Yeah. So, family, they can be the harshest, when it comes to judging or telling you, why is it that you don't want this or why is it that you want that? So, I think it's fear of judgment, but also just hearing people say that, oh, you don't want kids? Oh, how selfish are you? It's like, no, I'm not. And we're going to tell you why today.
I'm trying to remember why it would have been hard to say I just don't want them. And part of it might have been that I knew that I was only 21, and I had been warned previously by my stepmother to never say never. I think I was criticizing something she had done. I think I had said I would never do that, and she said, don't say you would never do that. And it's good that she gave me that advice because I remembered it when I did the thing I said I would never do. I'm not telling you what it is. It wasn't that bad. Anyway, I was very young. There was no excuse. I was not the only participant in this behavior. But anyway, it did teach me to never say I wouldn't, to never say that I was completely decided for the rest of my life. So part of it was having to admit that I might not be absolutely 100% certain about the rest of my life. But I think the other part is probably a lot of what Isabel just said, which is that there's maybe not judgment so much as questioning. And I get really irritated by not being trusted and by being second guessed. It's and there is the obnoxiousness of people wanting answers to things or even just telling you that you're wrong. And then another reason is, I really hate this one, is that people assume that something must have happened in your childhood or something must be wrong, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, something did happen in your childhood. That is then established as the reason for your flaw or your psychological defect leading to not wanting children. Whereas people who have children and they'll admit it's because of something that happened in their childhood, that's okay. That's not a flaw. I don't know if what I'm saying is making sense. I just know that the types of questions that come as a result of telling someone you don't want kids are just particularly grating, I think. And I think that was probably what made it difficult to just say, I don't want them.
So a reason I think that people have a hard time admitting that they don't want kids is because they don't have the answers completely clear themselves. And so any answer that they present to that question sounds like a jumbled mess, or can sound like a jumbled mess. And then that just opens up a big can of worms for anyone else going, oh, well, and then they give their 2 or 3 cents that we're all familiar with.
Yeah, I think, well, when people give excuses, I think that might be separate from selfish. I think the excuses people give are more of an aversion to just saying, I don't want kids. And kind of in line with that are the people who say things like, well, the environment's in such a terrible shape, or the world is such a bad place. Why would I bring a kid into this? And I don't necessarily buy that either. I mean, I think it's not, I don't believe that those people desperately want children and that they're saying, I'm not going to have them because the world is so terrible. I think they already don't want them. And they're kind of adding, well, why would I? Look at the world. You know what I mean? As if to supply some sort of acceptable, kind of like it's something you can't argue. Whereas you can argue, but you might someday, or how could you not want kids? If you say the world is shit, what are they going to say? No, it's not. It's great. Oh, but then selfish would be like a whole different thing. Or maybe those excuses also make you seem less selfish. Like, of course, I wouldn't bring a child into this world because I love my future child and I would hate to, bring them here.
So so if I get this right, in order to seem less selfish, which we agree that having kids just for the reason of not wanting kids is not selfish, the 3 of us feel that way, but there always seems to be a need to tack on that extra reasoning why to appear not selfish, which is actually unfair because it's unfair. You think why people want kids, and you see this a lot where it's like, well, actually every reason why you want a child begins with I, so isn't that selfish? But yet society doesn't view it that way. So why is it that we have to have why is it that we have to tack on another reason to that? And why is it we have to tack on another reason to that, to reason to not wanting to have kids, just to give that excuse? It's almost like we're saving face, right? To our, this is like the judgment thing. We're saving face to our family, to our friends, to strangers that are going, okay, what's wrong with you?
I think it just gets really annoying when people start asking you about such a personal thing, Let's take something else as an example. How much do you earn in your job? I mean, when you get asked things like that, you're like, whoa, you're invading my personal space, man. Get away. The same thing happens to me when they ask me about children. And they don't think, people just don't think it's such a big deal because it's such, it's a given, basically. And I don't know, like today I was in this lunch with my aunts, and one of them keeps nagging at me that she really wants me to have children, even though I already got my surgery and there's no way I'm having kids. She still keeps nagging at me. And so I was telling her, no, I'm just going to have nieces and nephews when my sister decides to if she decides to have children, and I'll be the best aunt, and that's fine. And she just leaned over and she was like, when you have nieces and nephews, you're going to want children. And I was like, see, this is the kind of thing that I want to avoid, because it's such a subjective matter. So I can't possibly, with people like that who are absolutely close-minded, people who really don't want to hear anything, because whatever you say to them, they're going to try and push back. Whatever argument you give them, whatever reason, it doesn't matter what it is, they're going to push back. It's like when people tell you, you say, okay, I don't want children. Then they're like, oh, what if your child turns out to find the cure for cancer or something like that? There is more chance that my kid is going to be, I don't know, a normal person like you and I, instead of becoming, the doctor that changes the world because he finds a cure for cancer. I'm not willing to risk that. It's such a small chance. So it's for me, when people start really getting into the whole, oh, you're selfish and why is it that you don't have kids? It becomes irrational. The conversation becomes irrational because it's all about perception. It's all about feeling. It's all about emotion. It's really not about arguments. It's really not about. So it gets tiring. It gets so tiring.
I think it's interesting that people start off with those questions. Like as a female, I get, so are you married? If they don't know me. So no. And do you have kids? Also no. And then sometimes the conversation goes flat. And what annoys me is that is how a greeting is, like that's where it starts. It's like nobody asks anything interesting. Although now I want them to ask me, what do you do for a living? Because then I can promote all this stuff. Like I want that conversation. So now that's actually given me an avenue to not feel self-conscious about saying I don't want to have kids. I happily announce that. But it annoys me that is the lead off when you meet somebody. Those are the questions, especially if you're a woman, right? It's like, do you have kids? And then no, and then it's like, all right, here we go. Let's go on this roller coaster and see where this conversation ends up, because a lot of times that's all people want to talk about. And I wonder if people feel defensive being on the other. I mean, we get defensive sometimes, or I can get defensive when someone says, "Oh, like why don't you want kids?" But if you put it out there, I don't want children, then it always seems to be the assumption that we are attacking their lifestyle. That's some of the interaction I've gotten. I get a lot of support, but I've seen it where you kind of feel like you're attacking them, which you're not. You're just stating that you don't want to live a certain way.
Well, I think it's easily perceived as an attack. Well, I honestly don't mind the "do you have kids" question. In part because I think it's kind of fun to say no, just to see what their response is.
That's true.
But also in large part, I think because since most people do have kids, especially people, whether your age or mine, my kids would be older, but most people do have them. So it's just a super simple, small talk. It's like talking about the weather. And the only thing that makes it awkward is us saying no. So it's really our fault. Yeah.
Damn it.
And then getting back to the reasons people give for not having kids, whether it's, maybe later or with the world in such a mess. No, why would I do that? It's the overall, you talked about selfishness and about it kind of also being a diversion from the idea of it being selfish. And I think what really bothers me more than other people thinking it's selfish is people who don't want kids saying, yes, I'm selfish because I sue me, I'm selfish for not wanting kids. And it's like they're just kind of ruining the whole thing by saying that, because and most of all, they're ruining the word selfish. They're assigning it a meaning that it is not accurate. It's like people who say figuratively, or people who say literally when they mean figuratively. It's a complete screw up of the whole word. I think what people think selfish means is living my life for myself. And that is not what selfish means. And I'm just going to read the definition for everyone out there, especially for any child-free person who says, I'm too selfish to have kids. I'm selfish. Maybe you are too selfish to have kids. Some people might be. That could be true. But that doesn't mean that selfish people aren't currently having kids and still continuing to be selfish. But for the record, selfish is an adjective. It is of a person, action, or motive lacking consideration for others, concerned chiefly with one's own personal profit or pleasure, but also without consideration for others. So what somebody who really wants to be a grandma might argue is, well, I want grandchildren and you're selfishly not having them and you're not giving me my grandchildren. But that's like a whole fallacy because it's the grandma being selfish for wanting someone to have kids in order for her to see those grandkids like once a month, maybe. Um, just plain and simple, whatever your reasons for not having kids, you're not selfish. It is impossible to be selfish by not having kids. You are ceasing to do something. It's like if I don't eat that cupcake, I'm being selfish for not eating that cupcake. I don't, it makes no sense at all. So just please stop saying that. It's absolutely stupid.
When I think about not having kids, personally, surprisingly, I think of that child's life and what the whole like I hated being a kid. So like I felt like I was born 30 years old and trapped in a little body for a very long time. So when I think about not having kids, for me, I go, wow, I'm sparing this a life, this whole growing pains that, yes, I've adapted and I'm enjoying life now, but I don't want to subject somebody else to that, especially with all of the, previous lifetimes of trauma that will be injected into it from not only my DNA plus whoever would be the other half of that DNA, right? So I think, well, that alone, that's not selfish because I'm sparing this life something that it probably didn't ask for. There's people that think that certain, beings are called into existence and you choose your parents and all that sort of thing. And I don't necessarily buy into that, but I know some people do. So that's just my view on it. But I actually think of the kid. And so I think it's a good thing that I'm not procreating. Not that I'm terrible, but who knows what kind of life that child would have.
So if you wanted a child, would you not have the child because you wouldn't want to subject it to life's pains?
Not just life's pains, because we've had this conversation before. You brought it up that you can't avoid pain in life, no matter how good your life is. But it's knowing, I believe that I have the responsibility to kind of end all of the unanswered issues that have just kind of ended up in my life. And I view children as, pieces of the unfinished business from previous generations. So if I wanted a child, I think it would be selfish for me to bring a child in because it wouldn't, I can't see it being for their benefit, to be honest, because they have to deal with all of the interesting things that go on in my head. They'll get a piece of that and a piece of, all of the things that make up me that I'm at peace with now. They will have to deal with some of that, and that's just mean to put on somebody. Never, mind the fact that I would have to be responsible in raising that, and no thank you. But like strictly from a child's point of view, and yes, they could inherit like a massive musical talent because I have that. They could inherit it, but I would feel bad. I really would. Because it's not just the pain and suffering of life, because I believe that you can have a happy life. And I would hope, that's what I do with my nephews. I try and encourage them to do everything they can to get to know themselves so they can have a happy life as they get older. But it just seems mean, and maybe it's because it doesn't feel right for me to have a child. So I think that a lot of it has to do, like, it does not feel right to do that. And I might be the only one that feels that way, so that's hardly an argument that people would understand unless they're in my head.
Well, I wish more people felt that way, that the last thing anyone should do if they don't want a child is have a child. Because there's nothing crueler, I think, than someone who hears you say, I don't want children. I do not want children. For them to say, you should have them anyway, is like,
Makes no sense.
Why would you do that to that poor child? It's going to be miserable. Not really, because, but it could be. They don't know.
Yeah. It seems like the misery starts like kids are happy, babies are happy, children for the most part are happy and they adapt and whatnot. But then once you get to teenagehood and then adulthood and then you stop mattering, because then it's like you're setting up, we're set up to grow up and then procreate. Like it's just that endless cycle, right? So it just seems, and when I look at a child, I don't see a baby as a baby. I don't see a 2-year-old as a 2-year-old. I see them as future adults. I've always viewed it that way. And, so when I see, all these babies being born and all the mushy gushy stuff that comes along with it, I'm not talking about childbirth. I'm talking about like all the accolades you get for having a kid and all that sort of thing. I stop thinking about the parent and I start thinking about that child and how it's going to grow up in whatever environment it's going to grow up. And even if it's in a ideal environment, I think of the struggle it'll have as a teen, as an adult, finding its own way. And then again, going back to the whole, okay, now it's your turn to procreate and go through that experience. Like, that's how I view all of it. And it just seems, and I like the point you made, Kristen, about, you wish how child-free people would stop saying that they're too selfish to have a kid, because it almost seems like an unconscious thing. How people just randomly have babies because that's what you do. It just seems like, I believe that there is sometimes not a lot of thought put into why are you child-free, and there doesn't have to be. I just happen to be someone that overthinks a lot of things. But people do randomly throw out, well, I just don't want kids, and never really go any deeper than that too. And so then I guess all that, the shitstorm happens, because then all the questions come and they're going, oh, well, actually, I don't really know. And then they meet somebody and it's like, oh, well, I thought they'd make a great dad, so I decided to have a kid. Like that.
Pardon the interruption, it's time for a short interlude.
Growing up, for me, it would have been so helpful if someone had mentioned why they don't have kids. Just because, like, I knew I didn't want to have kids, but I never voiced it until, I was 22, never said it publicly, never really consciously understood that I did not want to be a mother until my early 20s. And I think if people just kind of fought the fear of saying, I don't want to have kids, that would change so much. It would open something up inside of them, because I know that's what happened to me. It would start an uncomfortable conversation, possibly with family, friends, and coworkers, but it's a much needed conversation, obviously, because we're doing this. And the feedback that we're getting and the feedback I get from everything I put out there is positive. Even parents that contact me who obviously have kids, but are talking about their own struggles, having to be a mother and realizing too late that they had a choice. So I would love to encourage people to talk about the fact that they don't want to have kids. And it can start with yourself by writing in a journal and saying, hey, you know what? I don't think I want to have kids. And I've got something perfect for that.
I want to say that I really do think your journals are perfect for people, especially who either are just realizing they don't want kids, or for those who just aren't sure. Because I think it's got to be really hard to not be sure, because that's a big, huge decision. And so to not be sure must be like, and I guess if you have time, that's great. But it's so big, and it seems like something you should be sure about. It should be, I think if you're going to have kids, you should be damn sure you want them, and you should have thought about it for a long time. But I think maybe that's also why it's such a stressful decision. But with a journal like yours, not only does it give them space to write in an environment all their own, where there is no judgment, but where there's also encouragement, and not encouragement that says you should be child free. It's not that kind of, those aren't the kinds of things that are in there, which is what I love about the journal. It's little things like, this is how I felt when I realized this myself, or this is how important it was to know I had the choice, and just little happy things, to make you feel confident about even the fact that you're just considering an alternative to the standard path.
I agree completely. I think Lenora's journals are perfect, not only for what Kristen just mentioned, And I really want to just say it again. It is when, writing is one of the best ways to connect with yourself, with what it is that you want, what it is that you think, without feeling judged. Because even when you go to a therapist, sometimes you feel kind of judged, but when you're writing for yourself, you don't. And what I really think is also very, I mean, the journals also make you feel, because this is one thing that happened to me, and I think it's happened to many of us. At the beginning, you feel a little bit alone. You're like, am I crazy for not wanting kids? And then you realize that there's at least one more person out there, Lenora, creating these journals for people like you who are thinking, you know what, maybe I don't want to have children. And there's a whole community of us out here. So definitely get one of those. We're going to leave you the link down here.
Now back to our regularly scheduled programming.
I think it would be really fun to, we get asked a lot, why don't you have kids? But I don't think we ever ask people, why did you have children? Like when they do, that would be fun.
I want to start doing that.
No,
I want to start doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Like really, oh, a kid. Okay, why did you have kids? Like they're gonna be taken aback because I think nobody asked them, and I think maybe some of these people haven't even thought about it. It's just the thing to do. Basically, it's just like, yep, next step, got married, kids, or whatever. They don't really think about it. And what we were just saying about the reasons of being child-free or not. There's one thing about the Megan Dom piece that I agree with, just one, which is she says something like, I'm paraphrasing because I don't have the piece here in front of me, but something close to, show me someone who doesn't want to have children because they want to save the planet, and I'll show you a liar, or something of the sort. The reasons for being child-free are really internal things. They come from within. Someone who tells you, I don't want to have children only because I want to save the planet, like we're just talking about the birth strikers, right? I don't consider birth strikers child-free. They're young people, millennials and centennials, not even millennials, I think they're centennials, they're really young. And they're saying, oh, until we fix this planet, I'm not going to have any kids. Fair enough. But there's a conditional. Until we don't fix the planet, we won't have kids. Whereas a true child-free person would say, I'm not having kids, period. Doesn't matter what happens, going forward. So it's true that after you decide to become child-free, you make that decision, you choose that for whatever internal reasons, then you start finding even more reasons around you why your choice makes sense, in my opinion.
When she says, show me someone who's not having kids for the environment and I'll show you a liar, what I took that to mean, and what I agree with for the most part, unless there are actually people who do this, is that people who say it's for the environment are just those people that we discussed before, who don't want kids anyway, but hey, it's cool because it's also good for the environment, which is, I think, what Isabel was just talking about. Like, sure, you don't want them, but there are all these other reasons that it's great that you're not having them, because it does end up kind of having an accidental or incidental benefit. But it bothers me when people say, I'm not having kids because of the environment, or I'm not having kids because of, a lower carbon footprint, because that's kind of like throwing on this little cape of I'm a hero for not having kids, when really, come on, you probably just don't want them and you wouldn't have them anyway. I am impressed if you desperately want kids and you are choosing not to have them, you're making a sacrifice, like a very deeply personal and important and painful sacrifice by not having children. That is impressive. That's, hey, good for you. But otherwise, you just don't want kids, so stop acting like some sort of activist, a uterus activist.
So basically, if humanity stopped judging each other, we wouldn't have this problem. Because we could just say, I don't want to have kids. And everybody be like, oh, cool, all right, moving on. Basically.
People wouldn't even ask you, They wouldn't even ask you if you want to have kids. They wouldn't even, they wouldn't even go there. They wouldn't even care. I think that's what we need to fix. People just being too nosy about other people's lives. Like, what do I care, about if you or whatever you're doing in your house, whatever you're doing with your body. It's the same argument when we talk about pro-choice, when we talk about drug consumption, when we talk about euthanasia. There's just so many things that are, it's to the realm. I think they belong to the realm of the personal, of being a personal choice, and they shouldn't be regulated by government, and it should be questioned. And we know that childbirth or mothering or motherhood or whatever is not regulated by government yet. We don't know that something's going to happen in the future. But it's the kind of thing that, belongs to the personal realm, I believe.
I agree that there should be no judgment of people who aren't having kids. I think there should be more judgment of people who are having kids or who do have kids or who do want kids. Considering how, if we could just flip the taboos a little bit, I'd be happy with that for a while. I would like to see the conversation becoming, are you really sure you want to have kids? Or why do you want a kid? I mean, look at your current situation. Do you really think that's a good environment to bring a kid into? Do you really think you're emotionally prepared? Because after all, you are only 19 or whatever. No offense to 19-year-old mothers. I happen to know one very well who was 19. She did a great job. That's not the point. It seems like a more reasonable question to ask because you're considering bringing this whole new life in whose entire existence will be affected by the condition it's born into and the people who are raising it. So why wouldn't we ask? That makes no sense. If you want to adopt a child, people come and look at your house. They need to know how much money you make. They need to know what your job is. They have a whole list of questions that need answering for you to adopt a child. I don't know why those kids are given special treatment. That's why in the age of the child, anybody who is of childbearing age can adopt, and they don't have to answer any questions anymore, because if you can biologically pop one out, then you may as well, you're just as fit to adopt, right? We have absolutely no protections to potential children except for the people who want them not to be aborted. I don't know. I think it's perfectly legitimate to judge anyone who wants to have a kid.
So I don't know what side of the argument this is going to be on, but I thought, my inner thought was, all right, well, having children is natural because, for the most part, women are born with the parts to house a fetus and give birth to it, and men are equipped with parts that, help produce a child. So, okay, it is natural. And is that why we're so, that's just what people do. But again, it almost kind of feels like we are this giant experiment and some massive creator is watching us. And some of us are starting to wake up and go, wait a second, I want to do something different with my life. And then society's going, wow, wait a sec. All the ads are going towards parents and no, this is what you do. And anything else is considered wrong. I used the term conspiracy before and I'll use it again. That's what it kind of feels like. Because, okay, yes, I admit that I do have the parts to give birth to a child. But to me, it does not seem like a right choice for me. For not even, there's no even other reason. It just doesn't feel right. But you can't explain that to somebody who's so pronatalist,
I think the people who call you selfish for not having kids, and who, especially like if we look at some of the religious feed on Twitter or any kind of more conservative perspective, is what you just said, Lenora. You have a uterus. That's what it's for. Men have their baby injection device. That's what that's for. And so to not have children is to deny your natural biological imperative. So that reduces us to mice or, just some other animal, rabbit, that unthinkingly goes around copulating and reproducing. And okay, if that's the road you want to take, then you can't pick and choose where we get to start being rational thinking people. If we're just animals and we're instinct driven, then we can't be expected to comply with laws. We can't be expected to have a moral code. We're either thinking rational beings with an ability to determine our own course, or at least think we're determining our own course, depending on how you feel about free will and fate and destiny and predetermination. But either way, you think you're doing what you want to do. So we can either be that, we can be that thinking rational being with an ability to evolve emotionally and intellectually and change things, or we're not, or we're animals who should not be driving, we should not be voting, we should certainly not be reproducing for that matter, because I mean, if we care about kids, you just it's like using the Bible to support one idea while completely disregarding another part of the Bible and calling it outdated. You can't do that. You know, that's just bullshit.
All right. So again, the Bible in most of society has always been like heterosexual is the norm. That's the only way to go. But as we know, there are varying degrees. Like sexuality is not a black and white thing for people. And yeah, for me, like that's also part of nature. But a lot of people, not a lot of people, but there are certain groups that would say, you know, homosexuality goes against nature. When in fact, it really doesn't. You know, but they're thinking, okay, we procreate, this is what we do, man and woman, that's it. Right? But yet life has shown us that that's not the way for everybody. That's not one direction. So I always stand by the argument that not wanting to have kids is also natural. And I know that's an unpopular opinion for a lot of people. They don't even think about it. They just like mindlessly do it. But if you really thought about it, how many people that have kids don't actually want kids? It's just circumstances have led them to have it.
That's the thing. Like, it seems like there's a whole lot of hypocrisy. It seems like the people who are, and this is not a new or earth-shattering comment, but it seems like the people who are most anti anything not heterosexual are the people who maybe are a little bit envious that other people are freely expressing that desire. So many politicians have been guilty of that, have been guilty of, you know, trying to reduce rights or keep rights closed off to anybody who's not heterosexual. And they've often ended up being gay. And I think the people who are most angry or most bothered by people not wanting kids might be everyone I know who's a parent who just loves being a parent and who consciously wanted kids. They don't care that I don't want kids. They don't judge me at all. I think the judgment comes from people who felt like they had to follow their biological imperative, or they had to follow the norms of their culture or their society or their church. I feel like what they're saying is, I had to do it. How come you don't have to do it? How come you get to get away with not doing it?
Just circling back to what Lenora just said about, you know, homosexuality and religion, having kids is black and white. It's either you have them or you don't. You can't be a half-ass mother, you know, just have a kid for like 3 days and then, you know, you're not a mother for 4 days during the week. That doesn't happen. So I mean, and I agree with Kristen. I think that there are many people out there who actually follow that social imperative and then they realize, oh, fuck, I really didn't want to do this. And now they see us, people that have actually made the decision consciously, and they're like, oh, why didn't I think of that before? And I think that these people need to talk about this with their therapists and not throw it, you know, that word selfish to our face every time they see us.
Well, that is all the time we have for this episode. We hope that you have enjoyed the conversation, and we want to hear from you. We want to encourage you to speak out about your own journey with being child-free. You can email us at childfreegirls@gmail.com with any questions, comments, any suggestions for further topics. Of course, follow us on YouTube. The link is down below to subscribe. We are on Instagram. We are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We are on Pinterest and LinkedIn as well. Facebook and Instagram are the best way to connect with us. And we really encourage you to speak out and get this message out as far and wide. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for watching. And until next time, see you later.